is in delta. Good. Okay. If something's toward the front of my body, what's the anatomical term for that?
Anterior.
Anterior. What if it's toward the back?
Posterior.
And if it's more toward the side? Lateral. And if it's more toward the midline? Medial. Good. We talked about those 4 ligaments the other day of the knee, and they were named according to their anatomical position. Very good. With reference to the anatomical position is defined as being in a standing position with the scapula retracted and the palms in a supinated position. I always think of supination as you're carrying a bowl of soup, your palms are up. The opposite of that would be palms down, which is known as what?
Pronation.
Pronation. Very good. And if I were to point the toe away from me like so, that would be ankle what? Plantar flexion, and if I bring the toe up toward me,
dorsiflexion.
Ankle dorsiflexion. Very good. All right. Just a quick double check on terminology. It seems like you're all up to par on that. And what I'd like you to do now is go ahead and stand up and find yourself some space so that you have enough room to move your arms and your legs without hitting the person next to you. So feel free to use the aisles in the back of the classroom and just basically spread out a little bit. And I'd like you to assume the anatomical position. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say and do a movement. And after I say and do the movement, I want you to say and do the movement as well. Okay? Neck flexion. Neck extension. Neck flexion. Neck extension. Neck lateral flexion. Go ahead and return to center. Neck rotation. And back to center. Very good. Let's go to the shoulder next. Say and do shoulder flexion. Shoulder extension. Shoulder flexion. Shoulder extension. Shoulder abduction. Shoulder adduction. Shoulder abduction. Shoulder adduction. Shoulder flexion. Shoulder horizontal abduction. Shoulder horizontal adduction. Shoulder horizontal abduction. Shoulder horizontal adduction. Shoulder extension. Shoulder flexion. Shoulder extension. Okay, go ahead and assume this position with your elbow close to your body. It doesn't have to be touching your side, but your elbow should be close to your side. And I'd like to see your forearm parallel to the deck, okay, parallel to the floor. And say and do shoulder internal rotation. Shoulder external rotation. Shoulder internal rotation. Shoulder external rotation. Back to the anatomical position. Shoulder elevation. Shoulder depression. Shoulder elevation. Shoulder depression. All right. Anatomical position. Elbow flexion. Elbow extension. Elbow flexion. Elbow extension. Spine flexion. Spine extension. Spine flexion. Spine extension. Spine rotation. Back to center. Spine lateral flexion. And back to center. Good. Let's go to the hip. Say and do hip flexion. Hip extension. Hip flexion. Hip extension. Hip abduction. Hip adduction. Hip abduction. Hip adduction. Hip circumduction. And I forgot that one at the shoulder, so say and do shoulder circumduction. Okay, good. Anatomical position. Say and do knee flexion. Knee extension. Knee flexion. Knee extension. Say and do ankle plantar flexion. dorsiflexion, ankle plantar flexion, ankle dorsiflexion. Now, put most of your weight on your left foot, and with your right foot, say and do ankle inversion, ankle eversion, ankle inversion, ankle eversion. All right, back to the anatomical position. Good start. I'm going to raise the bar just a little bit. I'm going to be lazy. All I'm going to do now is say the movement, and I'm going to watch you do it. So starting in the anatomical position, you don't have to say it this time, just show me the movement. Ready? Do neck flexion, neck extension, neck lateral flexion, back to center, neck rotation. Excellent. Back to center, shoulder flexion. It's tough when you're in the front row, I know. Shoulder extension. Let's do that again. Shoulder flexion. Better. Shoulder extension. Shoulder abduction. Shoulder adduction. One more time. Shoulder abduction. Shoulder adduction. Shoulder flexion. Shoulder horizontal abduction. Good. Shoulder horizontal adduction. Shoulder horizontal abduction. Shoulder adduction. Didn't say horizontal. Okay? But stick with the shoulder for just another minute. Shoulder flexion.
It's like Simon Says.
Shoulder extension. Shoulder abduction. Shoulder adduction. Shoulder flexion. Shoulder extension. Shoulder abduction. Shoulder horizontal adduction. Shoulder horizontal abduction. Shoulder adduction. Good. Get in the position of external rotation and keeping the elbow close to the body. Stand up straight. Show me shoulder internal rotation and shoulder external rotation. Shoulder internal rotation, shoulder external rotation. Good. Anatomical position. Spine flexion, spine extension, spine lateral flexion. Back to center, spine rotation. Good. Back to center, hip flexion, hip extension, hip abduction, hip adduction. Just a little bit of hip circumduction. All right, anatomical position, show me knee flexion, knee extension. Show me ankle plantar flexion, ankle dorsiflexion. Okay, both feet on the floor, most of your weight on one foot, and with the opposite foot, show me ankle inversion, ankle eversion. Okay, I'm going to raise the bar a little more. Instead of going joint by joint by joint, I'm going to call out some random movements, and I'm going to watch you do them. Ready? Anatomical position, spine flexion, spine extension, elbow flexion, elbow extension, hip flexion, hip extension, knee flexion, knee extension. As we just went through those flexion and extension movements, did you notice that they kind of went from front to back? Show me neck flexion, neck extension, shoulder flexion, shoulder extension, hip flexion, hip extension, elbow flexion, elbow extension, knee flexion, knee extension. All of those flexion and extension movements are occurring